That evening, I returned home a little later than expected. There was a meeting in which I had to take part. I didn't really want to be there. The two people I mediated with were both, frankly, not very nice. Both are interested in causing as much pain as possible to the other person. They were not interested in resolving the situation. They were interested in the damage. I could understand why. The whole situation was a disaster from a business standpoint, but still, my job was to find a middle ground so that both parties could walk away feeling like they got what they wanted. In situations where one or both parties are more interested in hurting the other party than resolving the situation, or worse, where the act of resolving was actually the harmful part, this is virtually impossible. No one comes out of such a situation satisfied, I can tell you. More than once I have had to admit defeat and simply tell both parties that at this stage they will have to involve lawyers, because the only way to resolve the situation is to hurt the other. But at least in situations where both sides are trying to hurt each other out of blind rage and resentment, there is a chance that one side or the other will come to their senses. And this is where I come in. I think it's worth introducing myself. I'm Mike Absalom. I am a mediator, a specialist in resolving disputes and conflict situations, and a good mediator, so to speak, in a company that is hired by law firms as arbitrators. Babut, most of the time our work is woven into contracts. If a contract breaks down, instead of running to lawyers, two parties, or three, sometimes even four, come to us. We sit down, try to figure out the situation, what everyone wants, and try to come to an agreement. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. What we do is not legally binding. We enter into an agreement in the spirit, not the letter of the law. Sometimes what we do takes the form of a contract, but mostly it is a way of getting people to come together and find solutions to their problems. Less about the letter of the law and more about the spirit, sort of. So, yeah, that's what I do. I have always been doing this in one form or another, and I have a special style of work. I come from a large family, 6 children, 5 boys, and a girl. I was second in command and always seemed to mediate disagreements. Mom was a single mother. Our dad died 2 days after Benji, our youngest, was born. He was killed by a drunk driver while he was crossing the road after buying flowers for my mother. She was never able to come to terms with it, but she plunged headlong into caring for us. I did the best I could, but the reality is that even with 2 parents providing shelter, clothing, food, and attention equally for all 6 would be difficult, let alone for a single parent. She ran her own real estate business, and we were what our generation called the latchkey kids. We'd come home, cook, watch TV, get annoyed with each other, and somehow I always ended up being the reconciler. Dispute resolution is an interesting career path. I didn't plan for it to become my career choice. It just happened that way. I originally worked in a factory on the shop floor making metal parts for all sorts of things. Golf carts, ballpoint pens, whatever. As long as it had little pieces of metal in it, we made those parts. In short, I was the voice of reason on a number of issues and sorted things out when necessary. I have no idea why they chose me. Perhaps I was the most sensible one. Anyway, I was working in a metal shop. This was in college while taking a creative writing course. Yeah, I have no idea what I was thinking either, and there was a dispute between the management and the workers. Some of us were in a union, some were not. Personally, I wasn't, but somehow I still ended up representing the workers. There was a union representative, and he showed up sometimes, but half the time when management wanted to talk to the workers, he was nowhere to be found. Part of me still believes that the management, did this on purpose. Anyway, I ended up talking a lot, and although I think management was armed to the teeth, we managed to come up with something. 4 months later, everything happened again. The same thing, some kind of requirement that we should not have vacations in August because a large order had arrived or something like that. In general, this time they attracted an arbitration company, which, in essence, did the same thing as I did, only without bias, as the management put it. It didn't really matter. In the end, the arbitration company talked to me and the union representative anyway, and then simply referred the case to management. All they really did was act as an intermediary. We solved a problem that avoided trouble, as management put it, and everyone benefited from it. Personally, I received it. I received a job offer from an arbitration company. So I changed my college major to business studies with a minor in psychology and went to work for them. It was certainly easier on my hands, for sure. 2 years later, I graduated from college and have been working as a mediator ever since. And believe me, I have been a mediator in the strangest cases. Movie companies and actors' agents, car companies and their employees, lawyers who are partners, even a group of surfing competitors and the company that organized them. I've even done more than a few marriages. Didn't try to be a marriage counselor. Figured these guys knew what they were doing, but just came when all else failed, and we had to figure it out. But I have a special technique, one that works for me and not for anyone else. People react when they see vulnerability and when they see honesty. So when I meditate, I try to show people my vulnerability and honesty. I sit and talk to both sides separately, trying to understand who these people are, what they think is important, how they feel about the situation, what they want from it, what they think about the other side. In general, trying to understand both sides. I must say that I have been reprimanded more than once by senior partners for using this terminology, but this is how I am beginning to view clients, and it is working for me. I just need to not use those words. After that, I can usually find a way to get each side to think about what the other side thinks is important. For them, this may not be the case, or maybe this is the reason for the conflict. Either way, bringing them in touch with the other person's needs is of paramount importance. Orson Scott Card, a famous science fiction author and general religious fanatic, once wrote a story about a girl who could see the connections between people. She saw them as lines of force. They created a web between everyone, and she could see how to cut those lines with a few well-chosen words. As an aside, how is it that some people can be monstrously smart and write incredible stories, interconnected with interesting people and great dialogue, and yet have this incredible blind spot in their lives where they believe in invisible people living above clouds? I just do not understand. When I read his story, I noticed the similarities between what I do and what this fictional character does. I can't see what connects people, but if I'm pushed enough, I can usually figure it out, and my job is to either untangle existing connections or create new ones that undo old ones. At least that's how I see it. In fact, these are all just touching things, and I can't convey it, and this is definitely not a skill that I practice at home, with my wife. Oh yes, wife. We haven't even mentioned it yet. I know this is a little frivolous for a story in the Loving Wives section, but I needed you to have an idea of what I do and how I do it, because it will matter later. Do I need to describe myself? Necessary? Indeed. When I read a story, the last thing I care about is what the guy looks like. Okay. My height is about 80 meters exactly. My weight is 89 kilograms. At least that's what it was a week ago. I drink vodka, love wine, ride my bike, and yes, my hair is starting to thin and is definitely graying on the sides. Fuck aging. It's enough? Do I need to continue about skin color? Or that I'm clean-shaven? Or any of that crap? Does anyone care? Is it true? Yes, I have manhood in my pants. Not huge and not small. Normal. God. So, wife, yes, I have to talk about her. Love of my life. I know everyone says that, right? But it's true. It's like one of those things when you talk about children. It's great to have them. For those who have never had them, it's just words. I think this whole story about announcing that you are having children is very interesting and not at all funny. You say, "We're pregnant," and even that makes me smile. We? I would just impregnate her and have a great time, and from that point on, everything is 100% hers. She will develop it within herself, endure discomfort, she will have to give up alcohol, urinate a lot, and finally endure the humiliation associated with childbirth, not to mention the body problems that may arise after, from stretch marks to postpartum depression. And yet, it gives out this. Yes, you did a lot, asshole. And here's what all your friends tell you. Go and get drunk. You won't be able to do that when the baby is born. Go to the cinema. You won't be able to do that when the baby is born. Go and eat. You won't be able to when the baby is born. The baby will be born. go and sleep. You won't be able to when the baby is born. And my personal favorite, go have sex. You won't be able to once the baby is born. And then at the end, they throw out one phrase. But this is the best thing that has ever happened? Yes, it looks like it. Sounds great. I mean, so many people say this, so they must be right, but damn. You get all sorts of very explicit and specific reasons why it's going to suck, and then at the end you're told, but it's great. The best thing ever, and I can't help but notice that there's nothing specific about it. But given how I feel about Christy, I can't quite believe it. By the way, that's her name. She was Christy Fenton, and now she's Christy Absalom, or at least she will be for the next couple of months. In any case, that's how I felt about Christy and how she felt about me. When it came to children, I realized that my little joke about the party was both true and coming from a place of darkness. For us, the prospect of having children is impossible. During her first period, Christy discovered she had a lot of pain and female problems, as she put it. Her parents took her to the hospital and discovered that her tubes were not formed correctly. Surgery was required, they were tied, and the egg parts of the tubes were removed, because if this had not been done, then at best, monthly periods would have been painful, and at worst, life-threatening. Apparently, she was told it was a cancer just waiting to appear. So, they were removed, and with them, all chances for Christy to have children. By the time we were together, she had already gone through it, or as much as it was possible for a woman to go through. I understand that a woman does not consider herself a woman if she cannot perform one of the most basic functions of a woman. I don't think I believe it, but with Christy, I knew it was a dark place that none of us wanted to look too deeply into. I agree with that. I love children and assumed they would be somewhere in my future. But when the choice came between Christy and my life and children, it was an obvious decision. We talked about this a lot, and a few years ago, Christy even said that we should get donor eggs, combine them with my seed, and create a surrogate pregnancy. We looked into this possibility, I got tested, it turned out that my swimmers were fine, and even began to study surrogate mothers and the procedure itself. But I was never aimed at this, something was wrong here. Christy was very enthusiastic, but when it came time to do it, I just couldn't do it. I don't know why, but there's something wrong with this. It wasn't until Christy fainted when I said no that I realized what was going on. Christy carries within herself a groundless sense of guilt for not being able to have children, and this whole surrogacy thing is both an attempt to make me happy and what she considers her God's punishment. I have no idea where it all came from, but it was there, and it took some therapy to put it all back together and begin repairs. But you do what you have to do. I knew something was wrong, and it seemed like my subconscious knew more than my conscious mind. Although it was right then, in this case it failed me greatly. So, no children. We had never adopted children. That also felt wrong, although I have no idea why. And we decided that if we had to be childless, we should accept it. We traveled, saw the world, ran from bulls in Spain, ate breakfast at the base of the pyramids, played hide-and-seek in the ruins of Pompeii, dove in Pearl Harbor, spent weeks drinking ourselves into oblivion, wine tasting in Napa Valley, and jumped off the Bangui Bridge. In Sydney Harbor, we lived a full life. Friends with experience moved away when they had children. They had a different life than us, and we all knew it. There was a lot of, we should meet, and at first, we tried. But no one was ever free. No one could find babysitters, and even when they could, they had to be home by 11, and couldn't even get much work done, because they had to be sober to be responsible for their children when they got home. As they walked out of our downtown apartment in Bellevue, a suburb of Seattle, we looked at each other, giggled, and said, "It's a good thing we don't have kids." It was all a bit pathetic, and we were clearly covering our holes, but we were also drunk, and then had slow, lazy sex on the balcony. We were 3 floors up, so we weren't worried about being seen, so that had its advantages. Everything was fine with us. I have my own job, which is sometimes stressful, and she has hers. She was a curator at the Seattle Technology Museum. It's funny, she was into all the little gadgets like iPhones, iPads, Fitbits, and all the other things that are traditionally considered masculine, and I liked classical music, sculpture, and opera. We often joked that we had parts of our brains swapped, like that episode of Star Trek. We have been married for almost 12 years. We met at a field hockey match. I had just moved to Seattle from college in Missouri, and before that, from the suburbs of Chicago, where I was raised. I didn't have many friends, and someone from work invited me. And, frankly speaking, I had nothing to do that Saturday. Two cooperative teams going at each other, the level of frenzy was simply amazing. As far as I could tell, this was a great opportunity for the women of both teams to beat the living crap out of the men on the field and get applauded for it. Sometimes it was difficult to understand which of them were women and which were men. The women were so muscular and plump. I was just watching one man get hit in the shin with a club so hard that his shin guard was split, and there was blood everywhere, when I suddenly realized that someone was standing next to me, holding a glass of something and looking at what was unfolding in front of her. "Do you think he'll ever want to be a member of the team again?" she asked, looking at me. I personally wouldn't want to. Limping home is not the best way to complete anything, I said, somewhat unconvincingly. She smiled at me, looked back at the man who was being led off the field by his two teammates and said, "Oh, I can think of a way that getting into that situation could be fun. Although not like that. It was nice talking to you." She nodded and left. It was amazing for me. Christy is about 6 feet tall, brown-haired, but with a hint of blonde, a somewhat round face, beautiful eyes, emphasized by dark makeup and long eyelashes, also real as I later found out, a proportional upturned nose, stunning cheekbones, and a round mouth with a bow, which, if you concentrate on him, you just want to kiss him. Her eyes are incredibly blue, and she blinks too much. She's well-proportioned. Nothing too big, nothing too small. A defined butt that's shaped but not huge or jiggly. Slightly narrow in the hips, but overall just a stunning set. I watched her leave and almost kicked myself for my unconvincing answers, shaking my head sadly. Later that day, I had another opportunity when I visited a temporary bar set up next to the pitch. They only sold crap wine, beer, and pre-made cocktails that tasted, well, pre-made. I bought a glass of the least offensive wine. Yes, I'm a snob, and I know about wine tasting. My mom's sister, my Aunt Nancy, worked part-time reviewing wines, and I learned a lot from her about taste, bouquet, and all that nonsense that comes with tasting. I also learned that 95% of this is complete nonsense, designed to impress others who have no idea about it. After all, wine is like art. This one suits you, and that one doesn't. There's nothing in the world that makes a wine worth $100, let alone $1,000, other than your willingness to pay for it. I bought the only thing that didn't make me wince and turned to leave, only to find this delightful creature who had been talking to me earlier standing in line behind me, fiddling with some small black box that had what looked like something attached to it. Handle. She was so focused on this that she didn't notice that I was standing nearby, patiently waiting for her to notice me and move out of the way. Finally, I coughed. She looked at me with some irritation, realized the situation, and said, "Oh, sorry, I just bought it, and I can't stop playing with it." She picked up a box that had what looked like a gray LCD screen on it. "This is Visor, one of the new PDAs," she said, as if that explained everything. I looked at her silently and she said, "Doesn't matter, sorry, let me get out of your way." She walked away, I walked around her, and then just stopped. She took her drink, turned around, and now I was standing in her way. She looked at me silently, a smile playing on her lips. "We need to stop bumping into each other like this," she said with mocking seriousness. I smiled back. "So, what is Visor? Let's get out of line and let's go talk." And we talked. A whole hour. I learned that Visor is one of those new digital personal assistants that Palm pioneered. I learned that she is obsessed with gadgets and that she is a qualified librarian and historian. I found out that today she came solely because her friend was playing, and she couldn't figure out how to refuse her without hurting her feelings. I found out that she is free next Friday and really wants to see the latest Harry Potter movie, but hates going anywhere alone. The hint was thick, and by God I understood it. And that was the beginning. We were in bed together at the 4-week mark and married about 10 months later. I can go on and on about the chaotic wedding. All my relatives came, and it was like a clampett reunion. Her relatives were there too, much higher class than us, looking at us suspiciously through their bifocals, and then cheered when someone on my side noticed them and pulled them into action. I could go on and on about her family. One sister, a brother in the army, doing God knows what, God knows where, and God knows with whom, father and mother, long divorced, and now friends. I only met her brother a few times because he was often out of the country, but he seemed like a pretty decent guy. Worried about his sister, but not blind to who she was. We drank a beer or 10, these army guys know how to drink, and had some, well, I would call them interesting conversations. I learned a lot more about her first boyfriends than I really wanted to know. I could go on and on about our years together, growing up together, having fun, exploring life, and generally acting like teenagers when we thought we could get away with it. We were partners in every sense of the word. Together, we joined several groups. I read poetry, and she came and tried too. She drew, and I, to be honest, didn't even try. I could read and write, but that was where my abilities ended. I didn't even know which end of the brush to use. I was trying to draw abstractions, and she would come and look and make comments like, "I see you're still 7 years old." And then she laughed hysterically. Oh, she was driving herself crazy, my wife. We both had modern mountain bikes and used them extensively. The Seattle area is full of bike paths, and we made the most of them. This was our main physical activity, and we liked it. We even went on weekend bike rides to Portland and Vancouver. I don't want to say that this is like hippie nirvana. We quarreled. We had disagreements. God, this woman has character. When she's angry, she could turn any room into Siberia. She has a vicious sense of sarcasm that can cut right to the core. And when she gets really angry, she does it right in front of other people. And the only option for me was to either back down and look like a weakling or get into a catfight in front of her, from our friends. I tried both approaches, but neither of them worked. Retreating often speeded up the solution to the problem but made me look like crap in front of our friends. And fighting it preserved my pride but made our new refrigerator bed last much longer. She knows damn well what to do. It was strange because to everyone else, she is an absolute delight. Even if she hates the people we are with, and she could be sarcastic towards some people in our social circle, she is so polite and painfully sweet to them. She only shows her great displeasure towards me when she feels the need for it. In a way, I felt extremely privileged. It was only with me that she felt comfortable enough to take off her mask. It's a compliment. On the other hand, sometimes I was seriously worried about her mental health. But for real, she was infuriated by my attempt to use my damn Jedi tricks on her. Obviously, when I enter mediator mode, which is what her expression above refers to, I unconsciously adopt a certain posture and facial expression. She realized very early on what this was like, and it became something that, no matter what we were arguing about, was guaranteed to raise the intensity of the argument up a level or two. It was at these moments that the inevitable ridicule of "your family sucks too" appeared. There is no dispute that cannot be made worse by dragging the family into it. However, she also learned that she shouldn't even bother dragging my mother into this. This was confirmed by the weekend we spent at the motel because I kicked her out. Although, in fairness, I should note that it's not that she often didn't have something to shout about. There is no grace to live with me. I'm moody, can lose my temper over the smallest things, tend to look down on stupid people, and have been known to occasionally enjoy a strip club, even though I know what it represents in terms of exploitation of women. I, like her, am capable of provoking an unpleasant situation, although I prefer to solve it behind closed doors. She knows when she's crossed the line. Very soon she realizes this. As soon as her ardor subsides, I often receive a lot of apologies, and the next week, I even find it difficult to get up in the morning. I should tell you a little about our sex life. She is simply amazing. Well, at least that's what I thought. In the bedroom, we are simply the perfect couple, or in the living room, or even in the back seat of the car, one night in Victoria, Canada. We explored each other, were honest about our fantasies. At least I was. As it turned out, she wasn't, not completely, did some risky things. Went to dinner with her when she had no underwear and a short mini dress, never knowing who she would flash in front of, that kind of thing. We played games a couple of times where I picked her up at the motel bar until one night some guy hit on her without listening to her, and I had to explain the facts of life to him by grabbing his reproductive organs through his pantsuit, after which we never did it again. I never did it again. With what I know now, who knows if she did it? Despite all this, we were happy. At least that's what I thought. For me, it was like that. My job was sometimes time-consuming, and in some situations I had to travel for business. I worked as an employee for my company, and to some extent I had to travel to where the work was. But it never lasted long, and I returned home, and this did not happen very often. Christy would sometimes go visit some tech company that wanted to donate old equipment to her museum for posterity, and a couple of times I had to go with her too, although I had to sit and watch a bunch of bearded men talk about how some hard drive was the size of a washing machine used to cost $750,000, and now you can buy earrings with a larger capacity than that. Wasn't my idea of a good time. But hey, I could, at Intel's expense, golf in Arizona in the dead of winter, play the dime slot machines, and get dirty with my wife on the hotel grounds. So why the hell should I care? So, let's return to the evening that I spoke about, which, in fact, will be discussed in this story. I entered our apartment with a beautiful view from the windows, threw my jacket on a chair and shouted, "I'm home! What's for dinner?" The lights were on, and I knew she was home. In the parking lot under the building, I parked next to her little Mazda Miata MX-5 convertible. The entrance to our apartment was directly into the kitchen, so I grabbed a beer, low-calorie diet beer, as she calls it, and wandered into the living room. And there she sits on the sofa, clasping her knees, looking at me and biting her lip. But she wasn't the one who stopped me. It was the guy sitting next to her. "Darling," she said, barely audibly. I stopped and stared at her, not believing what I was seeing. Her body language showed remorse, frustration, nervousness, and steadfastness, all in the same pose. You can't live as close to someone as we did for so many years and not understand what you see. Well, obviously you can, as I discovered. But right then and there, I was able to read the whole situation in full view. The guy, well, he was young. There was a smile on his face, barely non-confrontational. Not a grin, but definitely from the same series. Perhaps her cousin. It was classic arrogance that camouflaged some semblance of responsiveness on his part. Hell, for all I know, he might even believe it. But the body language was a classic display of possession and the need to imprint it on subsequent events. I was told without words that he was the alpha male here, in the sense of owning her. She leaned forward, and he leaned back, both arms stretched across the back of the sofa, one behind her. It was clear that she leaned forward slightly so that it would not appear as if he had his arms around her. But you don't have to be Einstein to understand that she didn't remove it. She tried her best to keep the situation from looking too bad, but the more she tried, the worse it looked. Now she looked more guilty than remorseful. Just by looking at both of them, I understood what it was, at least partially. Knew what was happening. But I didn't know where they thought it would lead, whether it would be a confession and a promise not to repeat it, or a Dear John caught moment, or whatever it was. But I understood what happened before that. It's impossible not to understand when you see something like this. I looked at them for another moment, and then plopped down into a chair standing next to the sofa, at right angles to it. This put me right next to this guy who was looking at me with what I thought was concern. I saw Christy frown as I sat down and could read the expressions flashing across her face. The way they were sitting was really unfortunate. If I start to get rowdy, she won't be able to stop me. But now it's too late. They were clearly acting out a script, and I had to hold back the anger building in my stomach when I realized what the script was. I opened a can of beer, sighed, and took a long sip. She bit her lip again, and I could see she was about to say something, but she didn't. I'm guessing it was something like, "Yeah, beer is really good right now." I chuckled as a thought occurred to me. It's funny how you react to sudden extreme stress. I've seen this before, and it always puzzled me. People say the most ridiculous things, or make some remarks, or raise some issue that has absolutely nothing to do with the current situation. This happens quite often in my work, and I've always been quietly surprised by what is going on in their heads at that moment. Supposedly, a complete denial of the reality of the situation, and I felt it myself. "What?" Christy asked. There was a note of irritation in her voice, which she immediately hid. I took another sip of beer, then said, "Yes, I just thought, I know you so well. I can read your body language. So I thought that in a situation like this, you couldn't hide your body language like that, not when you know it so well. And then it occurred to me that that's exactly what you were doing. Hiding it, wasn't it? I had no idea about this." She winced slightly, then sighed. "Well, yes, I think yes. But part of that is intervention, I think." "Intervention?" I inserted, pronouncing this word sarcastically. "So that's what you call our little event. Why not call it something more decent? Maybe a general fee. Coming to Jesus." It came out before I could stop myself. It wasn't worth it, though. I'm usually above that. "Mikey," she said reproachfully, using that two-tone method that people use to verbally emphasize a two-syllable word. "Oh, of course, dear wife," I said, emphasizing the word wife in the same way. "Continue. I wouldn't want to break your script." I glanced at the guy sitting next to her and noticed that one of my beer bottles was open in front of him. The white-hot rage I was feeling, actually beginning to feel, became even whiter. "Mike, you just said it yourself. You had no idea about anything. I think it's fair to say that, in fact, not only did you not notice anything, but there was nothing to notice, right? No signs, no decrease in affection or sex. Is it so?" She is right. Did not notice. I didn't even look closely. That's what unconditional trust does to you. But still, I'm an observant guy. My job depends on it, and it's not that I take it for granted. Even after 11 years, I still bought her flowers for no reason, sent them to work, took her out on weekends, bought her little trinkets, anything to show her how much I cared about her, which, from my point of view, made the whole thing even more nauseating. My mind was racing at 320 miles per hour, asking questions I had no answers to. Did I not give her enough? What else could she want? What prompted her to do this? Why? I tried my best to get my emotions under control. I will never get answers if I leave, no matter how strong the temptation. I'm smart enough to know that at some point it will happen, but first I need answers, and this is the way to get them. I won't get them all, and she'll outright lie about some things. That's inevitable. I know she still loves me and doesn't want to hurt me any more than she already has, so I knew she would lie about something she judged. This is human. But that's the whole point. I know that she loves me. I am 100% sure of this. Even with evidence that this love was shared with others, I am still sure of it. Maybe I'm deceiving myself, I don't know. In life, you just know some things, and I know that she loves me. I think I'm just kidding myself about the "to the exclusion of everyone else" part of the phrase that is supposed to follow. I just shook my beer, not yet trusting myself to speak. Christy took this as confirmation and continued in the most measured voice she could muster. "So, logically speaking, since I have never given you less than what you have always received from me, how does that affect you?" "I remain the same person I always have been, and this," she gestured to the man sitting next to her, "is just another dimension. That's all. Nothing changes. I still and always will love you and be everything to you that I have always been. And I want the same in return. Naturally, you can understand this. You haven't lost anything. Just like that." She actively hopes that I will go for it. I'll look at everything from her point of view. That's smart. She's trying to do to me what I do professionally. Make me see everything from her point of view. Metaphorically, walk in her shoes. There was silence for a second. Then she said, "It's not you, dear. In any case, you are not deficient at all. Please understand this. You rocked my world and always will. Just what, Christy?" I said, surprised that I hadn't knocked over a coffee table and hurt someone yet. "You just need more than I could give?" flowers, gifts, weekends, love. I chuckled at the last word. Is that just not enough for you? Does he have a huge man's tool? Is that all? Christie's restaurant began to crack. Her voice and face began to tremble. I saw tears welling up in my eyes. The guy sitting next to her leaned forward with a worried expression on his face and looked at me with hostility. Christie, he said in a surprisingly deep voice, baby, everything is fine. Stay as we agreed. His hand, resting on the back of the sofa, moved forward to cup her body. And then I relaxed a little. I leaned forward and said, hey, dickhead, I can do this to you, right? We are almost blood brothers. And at the same time, I put my hand on the back of his hand, which was still lying on his lap. In one smooth motion, I grabbed his index finger and simply pulled it up and back. He had no choice but to follow him or risk breaking him. With his arm around Christie, there was nowhere for him to go, and when I pulled my finger back and pressed harder, bending it at an angle, he flexed his body to relieve the pressure. He could not move further, being restrained by his hand behind Christie's back. Mike, please, Christie said helplessly. I shot a very quick, venomous glance in her direction, then focused on the dickhead in front of me. She didn't move, which was reasonable, although she looked like she wanted to move, but even she wasn't that stupid. Listen, ass licker, this is my wife. No matter what you thought you were doing, she, still my wife. I placed special emphasis on these words, sticking out my finger even more. This is the sofa you're sitting on in my apartment drinking my beer. And frankly, moron, I'm not impressed by your desire to be a knight on a white horse. You're only here because this slut, Christie moaned slightly at that word, wants you to be here, but I don't want that. So, shut up and don't say a word, or even more bad things will happen. I grabbed your ass using 4 fingers on one hand. Don't piss me off any more than you already do, or more bad shit will happen to you. Truncated? He nodded with some desperation, and when I let go of the finger, he leaned back, removing his hand from Christie, rubbing the injured finger forcefully and looking at me with narrowed eyes. I held his gaze. Remember, ass licker, not a single fucking word. I turned my gaze to Christie, who played a little more but then recovered. That was unnecessary, Mike. James wouldn't try to hurt you. He's only here because of me, to support, to let you know he's not a threat. Is it true? How good for him. But he still better shut up. I won't hit you, but by God, now I want to hit someone, and he's right here. Mike, please understand. We didn't choose this. It just happened. What happened, Christie? Did you trip and fall on his manly tool? I read this phrase in several stories, and it just jumped out. She sighed. No, nothing like that. We just worked together and it happened. Sorry. I do not know what else to say. I love 2 men. Love you. I have always loved and will always love. But I love James too. I can't explain it. It's not the same, kind of, but I love you both a little differently. Please try to understand me. I took another sip of my beer, contemplating my answer. He put down his beer and then simply said, "Nonsense." She shuddered. No, that's not true. You know that I love you. You can't doubt it. I have never shown you anything but attention and love, and you know it. Even when... She paused, then continued. Other things happened. I made sure that you never got less than everything from me. This will never change. She looked at me intently, as if she wanted me to dispute this. She's already saying this, which means it will continue to be so. The classic leadership formula. Talk as if the situation has already been determined, people will believe it and begin to look for ways to adapt it to their reality. Not today, Christie, I thought. The point is that what I do, all this vulnerability, bringing people together through common themes, playing on their sense of importance and fair play, while it can indeed do wonders in bringing people together, in the right hands can lead to the exact opposite result. I don't do that, or at least I try not to. Although I can see connections between people, I can just as easily break them. It's like a massage therapist. He knows where the nerve nodes are, and if he really wants to, he can both inflict pain and soothe with his hands on your body. I can do the same. I just really don't like having that ability. When you get angry, you can actually destroy someone. And right now, I'm angry. Very much. She needs to understand my pain. She needs to know that she caused it. She needs to understand the reality of her future. And I was going to ruin that future. And all in words, right here and right now. Looking back, I'm partly ashamed of what I did, and partly I'm proud that I stuck it out and didn't give up, didn't remain a good boy. What I did was wrong. But on the other hand, what was the alternative? I wasn't going to give her what she wanted because that's not what I wanted. At all. This is the opposite of what I want. There is simply no middle ground here, at least in my understanding. If we decided to open our marriage together, then it would be one thing. But we didn't do it, and I would never do it. I am a one-woman man. Therefore, what she wants, by its very definition, is the opposite of what I want. What she wants, I can't give her. And the fact that this asshole is sitting next to her, and the way she behaves, makes it clear that this is all she can accept. I'm not going to give it to her, so, according to the rules of my profession, everything is over, except for the section of all the little things. I tilted my head towards her. I knew what her values were. I knew how hard it was for her, how she struggled with the need to do this. I knew that after this day, it would be difficult for her to look at herself in the mirror. Continued in the next video. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell so you don't miss the second final part. The link to the second part will be in the description of this video below.